everyone, this is Maya with Youth Voices, and today I'm joined with three very special students from the Kentucky Youth Council, and we're here today to talk about the importance of voting. So guys, would you please introduce yourselves with your name, school, and then what groups you participate in? Caitlin, would you start us off?
Sure. My name is Caitlin Wu. I am a senior at Sacred Heart Academy, and I am with the We Day Youth Board.
Nice to meet you, Caitlin. All right, Mara, would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Laura Taylor. I'm a senior at Louisville Middle High School, and I'm a part of the Muhammad Ali Council of Students.
It's nice to meet you, Mara. Thanks for being here with us today. And Alexis, would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Alexis, Alexis Kamick. I am a sophomore at U of L, and I participate on We Day's steering committee, and I'm also partnering with Mara's organization in the Youth Council board.
Wonderful. Well, yes, because all of you guys know each other through this Kentucky Youth Council, and we're so happy to have you here today because with everything going on, talking about the importance of voting is very important. So before we dive into this conversation of why voting is important, it's important to look first to some of the historical precedents that have brought us to where we are today. So Caitlin's going to talk to us a little bit about this. So basically, our government works best when we're able to elect upstanding and forthright leaders, and this is only achievable when we're able to pull from a diverse representative population of voters. But it hasn't always been this way. So, Caitlin, would you brief us on the history of voting in America?
Sure, yeah. So when I was looking at it, I kind of found like five big events that you can kind of look at to, I think, kind of best understand the history of voting. So the first one was, of course, the biggie. In 1869, Congress passed the 15th Amendment so that all men could vote regardless of race or if they were former slaves. But of course, this didn't include women. So it wasn't until 51 years later that Congress passed the 19th Amendment that gave all women the right to vote. And then the third one I found was in 1964, poll taxes were finally like discouraged, I guess, through law. But basically, poll taxes where people had to pay taxes to be able to vote. And so from there, in 1971, they changed the voting age from 21 to 18, which was, of course, a huge shift that kind of uncovered this whole population of younger voters. And then finally, in 1975, the Voting Rights Act finally decided to protect the voting rights of those who could not speak or read English. So I kind of looked at those as like five facts that kind of represent this progress that we see to voter inclusion and everything. And I think it's important to look at because you see like how far we've come from like only including men, especially like white men, all the way until now where we finally only like 45 years ago or something crazy like that, by law protected the rights to vote for all people. And I think even though we have all this, and it seems that there were a lot of exclusions and like barriers that kept people from voting, there's still like so much in society that we still have that like suppress this really important part of our society and our government that don't allow for people to vote. And so I think it's important to see how far we've come, but also like how much more we have to do. So, yeah.
I think you phrase it like in a very excellent way. I mean, you note that we've made so much progress, and yet there's so much progress that we have left to make. And I think that's an excellent timeline that you've made. So my second question for you is, despite these developments in voter law, how are minority and marginalized communities still being discriminated against in this election process?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that comes to mind is like mainly it comes from poor populations. So, like those who don't have enough money, especially to get transportation to travel to vote, can be difficult. I know, like, even the process of if you don't have a driver's license or some kind of like identification, that can be really difficult to get if you don't have transportation to those types of offices and things like that. Also, I know, especially during this election, we're hearing a lot about um, people who just got out of prison who are having a really hard time voting because of like different fees that they have to pay and things like that that they just can't keep up with, which is kind of suppressing this minority part of the population, but also a part that's super important, obviously. So yeah, there's countless examples of just different parts of the population that aren't getting as much focus and as much like encouragement to be able to vote. And I think that there's so many things that we can do, like even just transportation and things like that, that we can start helping with to get more people to vote into the polls.
Right, and that kind of connects to your last point because, I mean, we know the history of voting, so we know why it's important to have this representative body. And when we're suppressing voting, the ways that you've mentioned, and how it's not accessible to certain groups, then we can't have a representative body, and then that's when it becomes dangerous. So that kind of leads us into my last question for you is, why is being indifferent to politics or apathetic to voting dangerous? And how does voter apathy subvert needed dialogue on important national issues?
Yeah, I think this one was hard for me. I think the most important thing, like I was looking at um, like definitions of voter apathy and all that kind of thing, and like what it means to not have to worry about voting and like not caring about what happens in politics. And I saw that a lot of it came down to like privilege. And it was like, well, if you feel that you have the privilege to not kind of speak on what's happening in your community and what's happening in your country, like it's so important that you use your vote if you're old enough. Of course, I'm not old enough, but if you're old enough to go out and do that and like to show that I don't, maybe this is too harsh, but to show that you don't value like what happens in your society or like the people that you put in place that have this much power over um, people. And especially like for me, that's like people who kind of can get trampled by like people in power, I think is kind of careless. And so I think like having rhetoric that kind of points towards voter apathy and stuff like that can be super dangerous, especially like in today's world and before such an important election.
Absolutely, and we're seeing that from all sides, you know, this trying to get people not to vote, but at the same time, we're seeing all these wonderful movements to get more people involved in voting because, like you're saying, I mean, it's a privilege to vote, and we need those of us who are in a position with this privilege, we need to make sure that we're using it so that we can show our community that we do value it and that we can give a voice to people who ultimately are voiceless and need it more than we do. So, Caitlin, thank you so much for telling us a little bit about the history of voting. We're going to move on to our next topic, which is how to vote in the pandemic. So we know why voting is important, but now we need to know how we can do it, especially during this crazy time. So in August, our governor and secretary of state reached a bipartisan resolution to make voting more equitable and accessible during the pandemic. And for the first time ever, all Kentuckians were eligible to request an absentee ballot. And this is important because a lot of voters are concerned about contracting or spreading COVID. So ultimately, voting has never been easier. So Mara, how can we use these new developments to turn out people to the polls and expand the electorate?
So absentee ballots this year are a lot different than any other in the past. So I've learned that like absentee ballots were for people who were like that weren't in their state or like people that couldn't go out and vote, like physically do it. So they would request that. But now Bashir has allowed everyone to request those. And this has expanded for everyone to acquire an absentee ballot. And this can like expand it by like having everyone have an option because we do have three options. We have in-person voting, early voting, and absentee voting. So this can appease to anyone and everyone, and there's no excuse for them not to vote. So this can like I think this will allow everyone to have the idea that you can vote and that there's not a reason that you shouldn't besides like your own like own views or like vendettas against voting.
I think that's really well said because now everyone has the opportunity to vote. So what I'm hoping to see is that we have a higher turnout rate and that when we see these percentages of our population that have voted once the election is over, hopefully it just skyrockets from the past years. So now we're seeing thousands of voters now have their absentee ballots. So Mara, why is it important to send these in as soon as they're filled out?
So as soon as you fill them out, you need to send them like ASAP because you like I don't know like the amount of time it takes to get to the post office and then ship it to wherever it needs to be shipped at, but it's going to take some business days to do so and for everyone to count it. And there's a very wide window of when you need to send them in, and it's just as soon as you get them, send them in. But I do want to talk on the topic on how to fill out your absentee ballots because it needs to be important. So please use black or blue ink, sign your envelope, use your regular signature that can be found on any documentation that the government has. Write your complete date, like 10 slash whatever 2020. And I don't know if you have to send your required documentation for absentee ballots, but whenever you do go to the regular polls, bring whatever documentation you may need, like your driver's license, and don't send it in late because they won't take it and your vote won't count.
Yeah, that's a very good point you bring up about making sure that you're filling it out correctly because I know a lot of people are getting them and then they're filling them out and sending them in on time, but maybe they've missed one of these steps. And in order to make sure that your vote is counted, we have to make sure that you're going through this correctly because otherwise it's just your voice won't be heard. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. So another way of voting, starting October 13th, people have been able to vote early in person at their local county clerk's office. So who is this a good option for?
Early voting is truly a good option for anyone that can access it. But I think absentee voting has taken more of like a precedent over any other voting in Kentucky this year. So early voting is most definitely for everyone. And if you need to do it, go do it.
And this is a really good option because unlike prior years, like if you're busy on election day and you have kids or you have a job, you can just go ahead on like a Saturday, and just go ahead and vote then. So again, we're hoping to see that more people, more Kentuckians are able to vote. So my last question for you, Mara, is where can people find out where to vote in their precinct, especially if they're confused?
So what I've found is go and look like in Kentucky is to go vote ky.com and they'll just it's like on a page and you'll scroll down a little bit and it will like have poll locations and your county and where your polling location is and times that they're open.
I think it's great that you bring up govoteky.com because this is an excellent tool and a lot of people, and I know the deadline has already passed for requesting your absentee and for registering, but that was also the place to do it. So it's just this wonderful tool and it's easy to remember. So again, that's govoteky.com. So Mara, thank you so much for talking to us about voting during the pandemic. We're definitely in this unprecedented time, but I think that we're going to see a lot of progress. So
thank you.
Now we've discussed the history of voting and how voting has never been easier in Kentucky. So Alexis is going to talk to us a little bit about why it's important to guarantee equitable and accessible voting. So again, I'd like to touch on this. Bipartisanship in our state has built a model voting system this year because of the pandemic. So Alexis, how can we use this example of cooperation in government to continue to demand equitable and accessible solutions to local issues in general?
So, as Caitlin and Mara have both talked about, there are various ways to vote. The absentee voting has been accessible for people in certain situations like health or like not in your state, like Mara talked about, but like it doesn't account for those people who don't have transportation and can't receive it because of the high demand for public transportation on the actual voting day. So as well as those people as who like can't afford to miss a day of work or leave work a little bit early because not all places close on election day. You know, some schools do and some jobs, but not all jobs. So I think the early voting option this year has been super helpful, not only for the pandemic, but also because it's helped people who, you know, don't have that transportation on the actual election day. They can go, you know, basically the whole month of October, which has been, you know, super equitable for everyone in those types of situations. And I personally went Saturday with my boyfriend's family, and we were in and out. It was like the atmosphere was so fun. It was so nice. Like when a new voter came, everyone like clapped and, you know, shouted. It was amazing. So I think that we should definitely be demanding early voting, not just, you know, during the pandemic, but for forever. You know, it's been super helpful and it's proven to be equitable for everyone. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm hoping that this can continue as a policy that we uphold in the future, because hopefully we're going to see results that are going to be really positive and demonstrate that we do actually need early voting, because it's allowing more people to get their vote out. And I love that you said that this early voting process has been so fun. And I was actually on a walk the other day, just walking some dogs, and this old man was in his driveway, and he's like, I voted today, and it was so easy, and he was a stranger, and he was so excited about it, and I wanted to tell him, like, I'm so happy for him, but he just turned around and walked away. I mean, he just wanted to tell me. So it's definitely an exciting time. But my last question for us, so Alexis, is just, as a community, what are some of the things that we can do to guarantee that marginalized groups have access to voter education? And this includes knowing how to register to vote, how to properly fill out absentee ballots, etc.
So first, I believe like panels like this are super helpful. They get the word out to like everyone, and like that's always nice. Social media is also, especially in this day and age, super helpful. All you have to do is, you know, take a picture, post it on your story, tag the little like, you know, icon, and you can click on it and find stuff out, which that's always fun. And my sophomore year of high school, I actually participated in like a door-to-door voter education program where like you know, this was definitely before COVID times, but you would knock up and, you know, talk to people and like ask them if they knew how to vote, and like if not, you know, gave them the resources that they need. And school campuses like, you know, U of L last year and even this year, there's been booths set up where people are like, you know, did you register to vote? Like, have you registered? Do you know how? Which that's always helpful, because even though, you know, I've been registered to vote, a lot of people aren't and they don't know how to. So you can catch those people, you know, at those booths that are like, dang, I don't know how to register. Like, can you help me out? And that's something that like not a lot of people are offered. And like churches, youth groups, like, you know, stuff like that, centers, those are always helpful to pass out voter education, especially in marginalized communities. A lot of people go to youth centers, you know, for help or for you know, tutoring, different types of services. You'll catch a lot of youth there. So I think those types of places are definitely helpful for voter education.
Yes, and it's just so important that people know how to vote and where to vote and all of these things. And just kind of like Mara was mentioning, I mean, even like how to properly fill out an absentee ballot. If we share this information on social media and just let it completely like diffuse, then we're going to have this more educated population of voters, and that's ultimately going to really end up benefiting us. And one more thing too, if you're a young person, I mean, and can't vote, there are still so many ways that you can get involved. You can get involved on political campaigns. You can call people and check in on your loved ones even, and just make sure that they are voting and that they're set to vote, and have these conversations, even these hard ones, with people that you care about. So we're going to look back at this time and realize that we are at a very pivotal point in our history. And you just think about what's happened in the past few months. I mean, it's crazy. So our vote will decide how we approach solutions for our future, and we need all voices to come forth and decide how to go forward. So with that, thank you guys for being a voice in this conversation, because the importance of voting, I mean, right now, it's just something that we all need to continue to talk about, especially as we near election day, which is in only like less than 2 weeks. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.